You've heard of the golden horn of plenty, traditional symbol of prosperity and of good things bestowed upon mankind. Well, these are the wheels which carry the horn of plenty.
In 1826, not a mile of railroad existed in the United States. The trip from the Atlantic coast to the new state of Illinois took long months of travel. Yet 10 years later, at the state capital of Vandalia, men were planning a railroad to open up the wilderness of vast forests and prairies.
Gentlemen, the excitement over canals and steamboats is at its zenith. But the air is filled with a new application of steam to land carriages and to railroads. So, we've come here to request a charter for a railroad to be built from Chicago on towards the Mississippi River, near the lead mines at Galena, Illinois, and Dubuque, Iowa.
Sir, we admire your courage. But this country doesn't even have roads or canals.
Our charter also calls for permission, if it seems advisable, to construct a good and permanent turnpike road.
Now you're talking, mister. Good pike roads are what we need.
In 1836, life on the frontier was primitive, and the railroad was as remote as the moon.
What I say is, them guys at Vandalia are getting too big for their britches.
Sure are. What's at Vandalia?
What's at Vandalia?
Vandalia, monsieur, is the capital of our fair state.
Oh, sure, it's the capital, but, tell him what you told me.
Well, there's nothing to it. Gonna dig some ditches and connect up the waterways. Looky here. Right next to Fort Dubuque at the head of the Fever River lies the biggest city in the West, Galena, booming with lead mines and store things. Riverboats carry furs and grain clear to St. Louis on the old Mississippi. What they're talking about now is digging canals clear to the Great Lakes.
Mon Dieu! Then boats could come all the way from Buffalo, no?
That's only half of it. Tell him the rest, Mike.
Well, maybe there's some sense in these canals. You know, we've been using pike roads and rivers for quite a spell. Yeah, but some crazy galoots have gone and chartered a railroad, too.
Oh, impossible.
Sure as you're born.
A railroad? To the Alleghenies, to the east? Mon Dieu!
No, not to the east. West.
Oh, no, this cannot be. People, factories, everything is to the east.
I know it, but they're going to build a pike road or a railroad right out into the prairie, clear to Galena. Of course, there's no swamps or rivers or engines in the way. And there's nothing but Galena when you get there. And when you get back again, you're in a dirty little settlement called Chickagong, which any Chippewa or Ojibwa will tell you means skunk. Or maybe wild onion. Wild onion? Ain't nothing there but Fort Dearborn. And I hear the general government's going to pull the troops out of there.
In 1837, Chicago graduated from a town to a city. It elected a mayor, a young fellow from back east. His name was William Butler Ogden.
We've just started. This sidewalk is just the beginning. We're going to build streets and good plank roads. Why, we're even going to drain the swamp.
Hooray for the mayor! But how about the canal, Mr. Mayor?
We'll build a canal, but the canal's too slow for us. We're going to build a railroad. Why, the railroad is the pioneer of our civilization. The means of communication between the East and the West, the Hudson, the Great Lakes, and the Mississippi. And we're going to bring it all into one big, convenient neighborhood.
I'm against railroads. They're bad things for farmers and bad for hotel keepers. Why, Chicago won't even be a place of business if the railroad goes beyond it.
That's right. They're undemocratic institutions. Ride roughshod over the people, grind them into powder. The only roads the people want are good common plank roads over which anyone can travel.
We'll get good plank roads, and we'll get a railroad, too. If I have to get in my buggy and drive all the way to Galena to raise the money for it myself. Someday, the railroads from the east will reach Lake Michigan. Merchandise will come across the lake and be delivered right out here by our railroad. Now, I say the farmers and the settlers along the right-of-way ought to own their own railroad.
I think you're right, Mr. Ogden. Put me down for a couple of shares.
If I can be trusted for the first installment, let's see, that's $2.50 a share. Yeah, it'll after harvest. About 5 or 6 bushels of corn. Takes me 4 or 5 days to get my wagon to Chicago, if it don't rain. And the traffic? Why, must be 200 wagons a day going into Chicago. With a railroad through here, I could ship my grain and my hogs. I'm for your dad-blamed road, Mr. Ogden, and so are my neighbors.
Now, wait a minute. I hear everybody ain't in favor. I heard you can't get the right-of-way through the city. Now, you're a member of the council, first mayor and all that. What about it?
I've got a permit to carry our rolling stock from the lake to the city limits. So we'll start there, Kinsian Canal, the city limits, and go on from there. We're going to build that railroad north and west, and we're starting now.
Say, I kind of like the cut of your jib. Yep, you'll build her. I want some of that stock, mister.
It took courage to plan and build a railroad west. There was nothing out there but a future. But there were plenty of men with the vision to see it and the courage to work for it. No rails came to Chicago, so the first engine came down the lakes, lashed to the deck of the brig Buffalo. How clearly they knew what they were doing showed up in the name of that first 10-ton engine, the Pioneer. And Pioneer she was, the first engine to move out of Chicago toward the great north and west. Coming back on her first trip, she brought a farmer's load of wheat, and word of this flashed over the countryside. A week later, there was more business than the schedules could handle.
Mr. Ogden, word spread among the farmers about bringing in that wheat. Why, there must be 30 carloads piled up in the Desplaines warehouse.
Well, that's fine. We have 6 berthing cars. Put them all at the service of the farmers. It's their railroad, you know.
It looks like we're in business.
We've just started. A year from today, I want to extend the line to Elgin or beyond.
Can you see the brigade yet?
Not yet. But on a nice clear day like this, I can see the engine 6 miles away. My notes ready?
Yes, sir.
Now give me the highlights.
Revenue for the first year, $23,763.74.
This year, we'll go over 100,000. Go ahead.
The board has secured enough capital to go to Elgin.
40 miles west of Chicago. Did I give you the fact that we now have a right-of-way through Chicago?
Yes, sir. The council finally came round, didn't they?
There she comes, just clearing Austin. You know, this is a primitive method. Someday we're going to get a system of communication, maybe this new telegraph. However, primitive or not, I can still announce our incoming trains 15 minutes ahead of time. Go ahead with those notes. I'll be back shortly.
The road went to Elgin in 1850, on to Marengo, into Rockford and Freeport. The first old-fashioned strap rails were replaced with heavier, safer T-rails of iron. In 1885, a telegraph wire was strung between Chicago and Freeport, and for the first time in the West, train orders were transmitted by wire. Business increased. Settlements, villages, and farms prospered wherever the iron rails went. And the road began reaching out for extensions. All the names were happily consolidated into the Chicago and Northwestern to include the large territory now penetrated by the United Roads. Conceived, equipped, and successfully managed during the rough pioneering years, without aid from the state or general government, the early rails could well be proud of their web of trackage, reaching into almost every nook and cranny of Wisconsin, crisscrossing Iowa and Minnesota, spreading out across Nebraska and the plains of South Dakota to the gold fields of the Black Hills. As far back as 1869, this railroad was the heart of a system of many railroads reaching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. First coaches weren't very comfortable. At night, they were lighted with spluttering whale oil lamps. The tops of the cars were only as tall as a man, and they were filled with smoke from the lamps. Showers of cinders and dense smoke from the panting engine came in, smelling of pitch pine and progress. Yes, it was rough. The trains chugged along at 15 miles an hour, but it was a beginning. And after 10 years of operation, the first sleeping cars ever to roll west of Chicago began. A trifle over 6 feet from floor to roof, they had 10 sections, a linen locker, 2 washrooms, and were upholstered in plush. Berths were 50 cents a night. The brakemen made up the beds while the iron wheels rolled faster and farther. Not only people, their goods and commodities. Now mail began rolling, and this pioneer line was the first to build and put post office cars into service. Dining car services began back in 1869. Conscientiously pioneering, the first all-Pullman train appeared. New luxuries and comforts were growing. Fields and factories, the heart of this continent, was brought closer together, and the interdependence of modern agricultural and industrial civilization became possible with our modern transportation system. The life and death importance of the road was dramatically demonstrated back in 1880. In October, the line had been completed to Pierre, South Dakota, with new farmers and settlers scattered along the way. It began to snow. It would snow for the next 6 months, until May 1881. And into the new country, into the small new farmhouses, came the cold, boneless fingers of tragedy. Only the shining rails could have developed new land so quickly. Only the rails could keep it alive.
Getting darker.
That train don't get through, we're gonna be out of lights well as food. Listen, I think I hear it. The train? Oh, it snowed 4 feet in the last few days. It'd take a 40-foot cut in some places.
Well, I thought they had cleared. I mean, along the track.
They did. You ought to have seen them, Ma. They had 7 loads of shovelers all the way up from the track.
It kept on snowing.
Yeah.
Nothing can get through snow like this. Nothing. Oh, I wish I'd never brought you children out here.
Ma, they got through. That big plow they've been using, the snowbird, they got through. I got some wheat and corn and flour and some oil for the lamp. Here, son, fill those lamps. Get out some of that corn and run it through the coffee grinder. Get some food on the table for your mother. There now, Ma. The railroad fellers said they'd get through. There's thousands just like us all along the line. He said they'd keep her open no matter what it took.
I was so worried about the chief.
Listen. Grind up some of that corn, boy. My ribs is sticking to my backside.
All that long winter, the worst in South Dakota's history, the snow kept falling. But the iron wheels kept rolling, bringing dried corn and coal oil, bringing a promise of the future when we'd build a vast new inland empire along the shining rails. Out of the savage wilderness, came our rich and fertile farms, our waving fields of grain. The children of the early settlers made that combine, powered it with fuel, used it to harvest the golden wheat. Today, when you look across our fields, you know the corn belt is close to the wheat belt. The iron rails link this field with the milk shed, the forest. The factory that built this corn picker is not far away. All our fields and factories are drawn together as they grew together by a pioneering railway system. Men of small vision thought they started the wrong way, west instead of east. Breakers of tradition and precedent, after 100 years, the Chicago and Northwestern, the country's only left-handed railroad, is still pioneering, still resolutely first west of Chicago. But the story has only begun. Where once man had to fight to live, now we live and we played. We play hard, but we work hard too. And we have the facilities to work with. Nowhere on earth is there a yard such as this, built, operated to handle in fabulous quantities the stuff of our daily lives. Seems like these are part of the daily life of our nation. Possible because a titanic transportation job is being done day after day, year after year. Think what it takes to haul more than 10 million tons of farm products to market. Think of the great grain elevators, the cereal plants, all the farms and factories, all the mills and ore docks drawn closely together by a great railway system. Our pioneering forefathers would look with amazement at the way Northwestern men and women do things today. Ours is a great heritage, but now as then, it depends on man. Men built that track up there. Men run those trains. Now, as then, men, out of their own sweat and skill, must lay every rail, drive every spike, build and maintain every mile of track. This is the way we do things today. We, the farmers, the shippers, we, the stockholders and bondholders, we, the train men, bookkeepers and engineers, all of us working together in a virile, productive partnership. It takes men like these with steady hands. It takes careful, thorough men. It's that man up there, the chemist in his laboratory. It's the men in the shops working with flaming metal. The finest machine tools in the world would be useless without men. Watch these men at work. Here are the pioneers, the modern pioneers making our modern transportation possible. We meet some of them when we buy tickets, for instance. But most of them are somewhere out there in the network of steel rails. Most of us never see these men, never think of the countless switches that must be thrown, all the workaday jobs that must be done, even to giving a locomotive a bath. The spirit of the pioneers is alive today. The engineer feels it. The conductor, the whole crew feel it. All aboard. And an army of men and women work together so that each train can roll faster, farther, more comfortably, and with greater safety, rolling up new records of service in transportation. next time you look down a clear track, don't forget how much we've accomplished, how far we've come in 100 years. Go into the modern club car. Make yourself comfortable. Go into the diner. Have a good dinner. While you're sitting there being served, the wheels will keep on rolling. They'll roll all through the night. They'll be rolling when you go to bed. They'll be rolling with each new dawn. A dynamic tribute to remind us of the vision and the enterprise that began 100 years ago when a few men stepped into the future and the song of the pioneer had begun. Moved deeply, made humble by the achievements of each succeeding generation, we, the modern pioneers, face our own future, determined that this nation, great yesterday, stronger, more tightly knit, greater today, will continue the good work, continue to pioneer a better, richer, and happier tomorrow.